Hello, hello, YouTube. This is your girl Megan. Welcome back to the Hood Astro Queen to all of my returning subscribers. However, if this is your first time joining me on today, be sure to hit that subscribe button, thumbs up this video, and share with a friend you know you want to. So, today I'm here to talk to you guys about this upcoming lunar eclipse that is all of the rage at the moment. Okay, it's supposed to be coming up on Friday. Now, in and of themselves, lunar eclipses are essentially when the earth passes between the sun and moon, or some people in astrology like to describe it as when the moon itself passes directly behind the earth into its umbra, as you can see here. But in this specific eclipse, we're going to be having a penumbral, I think it's how you pronounce it, eclipse. So that's just effectively describing what part of the shadow is going to be touched on or at least visible to others. So you can see in the graphic here on the screen, like so. Okay. Now, this is going to create a situation, and with all eclipses, or specifically lunar eclipses, the sun, earth, and moon are going to be perfectly aligned. And it's not only is something that's beautiful to look at, you know, if you're a sky gazer and it's visible to you, but it's also, you know, eclipses and their significance date all the way back to the ancient times when a lot of old school astrologers and just, you know, it was ancient folklore that these were horrific events, right? To a lot of people like the Mayans and so on and so forth, all of these prehistoric civilizations, they associated eclipses, both solar and lunar, with catastrophic catastrophic events. They were kind of like omens, bad omens of things to come. And a lot of times people looked at them as maybe we upset the gods, right? The gods are clearly not feeling it. They're not seeing it for us girls, and somebody's about to die. Hurry up. We need to make a sacrifice. You over there, we finna throw you in a volcano. Like, it was given that type of energy. These days, a lot of modern astrologers have come to associate these eclipses almost as like a wild card, because they essentially bring a certain level of heightened energy, but there is a certain level of unpredictability that comes along with that. They are catalysts for change, okay? They also associate and bring in, more often than not, big news. So, and that ties back into this thing of monumental changes and events. So, usually, in from a historical standpoint, you can associate these eclipses with shocking and sudden happenings, right? That happen that, even from a global standpoint, reverberates. And these things, I mean, of course, can be, I mean, just kind of bizarre and weird and seemingly random, but they can also be catastrophic as well. And that's kind of why it gives that wild card energy, because it's not necessarily bad, but it isn't necessarily good. It just really depends. And on an individual level, the way it's going to affect you does depend on exactly where this eclipse falls on your chart. Now, typically speaking, when it comes to like a luminary, like the major luminaries, sun, ascendant, or even your personal midheaven, you know, those are the areas of the chart that you kind of need to look out for if this eclipse touches that, or transits closely to that, because that could have a very profound effect on your life, for better or for worse. Most astrologers would say for worse, especially if it's like transiting your sun, moon, and whatever, or ascendant. But nonetheless, okay, we'll get to that in a little bit. Um, there is this energy that comes with eclipses, and like I said, in our case, this lunar eclipse, where it's going to bring things to the light that can no longer be ignored. Okay. You could even look at them as huge karmic checkpoints. They unlock large loads of karma, especially when the lunar nodes pass the sun's ecliptic, or the sun happens to intersect and transit the moon's ecliptic, or the moon, the lunar node. So now this can reveal the true character of other people. Once again, on an individual level, especially with this new moon, or excuse me, full moon in Sagittarius, which deals with truth, right? Things coming to light, the truth being revealed, whether it be people, right, and people's real and true nature is coming out, or people actually getting the courage to vocalize their truth, which catch that opposition between this full moon and our transiting sun in Gemini, right? Vocalizing your truth, expressing your beliefs, your ideals, and worldviews. But also, it's important to mention that the effects of these eclipses can last for quite some time after they initially happen. So what I don't want you guys to do is think that like on Friday the world is gonna shake and then we're just gonna move on with our lives. Because the real tea is that, especially when you get into like ancient astrology and things like that, a lot of ancient astrologers believe that the effects from a particular eclipse can be felt years after the eclipse has already taken place. And a lot of times, to get a full understanding of what this eclipse is going to cause, it takes a planet, like typically a very malefic planet like Mars, to transit that exact degree. So in our case, right, with this upcoming eclipse at the 15th degree of Sagittarius, it literally could possibly take, like I said, 2 years or something like that, when we have Mars, or whenever the next time Mars is going to transit Sagittarius, because we're currently in Pisces now. So that probably will be like next year sometime, maybe. Okay, whatever. Different video for a different day. Point is, right, for all we know, that is finally, or that moment that Mars transits the 15th degree of Sagittarius could be the moment where we actually get the full effects and the full outcome of this particular lunar transit. And a lot of times it goes on and continues until ending transit occurs, which for most people would be like Saturn, right? Because Saturn deals with things closing, coming to an end, the finalization of something. So there's that. And it's also important to mention that a lot of ancient astrologers felt that for each hour a lunar transit occurred, you could associate that with one full year, that it's going to have a lasting kind of after effect. So, for example, with this particular lunar transit coming up, it's predicted to have a duration of about 3 hours and 18 minutes, approximately speaking. So, we're looking at about 3 years and some change, according to those studies. Now, as I stated before, the individual effects may not be super important, which is why I'm not one of those people or those astrologers who create whole videos dedicated to how this eclipse is going to affect each sign. I mean, to each his own, his or her own, do your thing. I personally, like I said, don't think it's that important unless it falls upon a specific luminary or like your ascendant or midheaven. But I will say though that I want all of the mutable signs, or people who have mutable ascendant signs, particularly, or maybe if you're a mutable sun, to take notice. So of course this is Sagittarius, Geminis, Virgos, and Pisces. Kind of take a close inventory of like the things happening around you and so on and so forth. But for the most part, I don't think it's that that significant on an individual level. Now, some people also say that the countries that fall within the eclipse shadow are going to feel it the most strongly as well, which in this case would be Asia, Australia, Europe, Africa, and South America, not to mention Antarctica. So in the years to come, these are some areas, countries, or continents to really pay very close attention to in terms of the things associated with this full moon in Sagittarius. So, and it's interesting because Sagittarius does deal with international news, foreign affairs. So I think it's definitely going to usher in a huge change and something that's already kind of been building, especially with our current lunar south node in Sagittarius, right, at that 29th degree. So it like is this theme of like, okay, local community versus world events. Lots of new advancements being made, and honestly, and not to kind of get too sidetracked here, I do feel like a lot of the things that take place within our own communities are distractions from whatever is going on a large global scale. You know what I mean? So like I'm not understating the importance or the need of social justice and economic and structural reform in America. I'm just saying that two things can coexist at the same time. So as we're spending a lot of time on this, pay attention, like, because we are multifaceted human beings and we can look at more than one thing at one time and focus on more than one thing at one time. Kind of start keeping an eye on what's going on. What are some of the decisions El Cheeto, Mr. Trumpiana, are making? What type of decisions is he making in terms of, the people around us? What type of treaties are being retracted, or done away with? Or what type of agreements is he making? What type of allies are we forming? What type of interaction and involvement do we have with the world leaders? A great example of this is, I believe, he did away with the World Health Organization, which a lot of people have so many different opinions on that, especially given the whole coronavirus of it all. But, that's just a really good example. So this eclipse, like I said, in the years to come, could have a lot of advancements that surround these type of global interactions in foreign affairs, whether it's involving the U.S. or not. Now, this upcoming eclipse, once again, is taking place this Friday on June 5th. The time for a lot of people is 7:12 p.m. I think that's like the global time, but specifically for my folks on the East Coast, okay, it begins at 3:12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, once again at the 15th degree of Sagittarius. But then something else interesting that I saw was from an astronomy standpoint, right? Not astrology, but astronomy, the science of it all. I saw a couple of astronomers talking about it starting at 11:15 p.m., peaking at 12:54 a.m., and then closing out at 2:34 a.m. So if we have any fellow astronomers in the building, feel free to provide clarity, because I know astronomy and astrology obviously are very closely related and intersect in many different ways, but there can be some differences. So I was just kind of interested as to why I saw all of these different conflicting times going on. But nevertheless, one thing that I did also want to point out is that, in the same vein of a lot of this karma being remitted, and this is going to manifest in things that have to be addressed. So particularly, once again, I want to get back on to the fact that our current transiting south node is in Sagittarius. And although this eclipse is not necessarily going to be conjunct that node, like it's not going to occur super closely to the node, but with it still being in that same sign, it does activate and, like, once again, reinforce these themes that are going to, like, present themselves in, once again, ways that we can't ignore. Also, it's important to understand that in the U.S.'s birth chart, the ascendant sign, so America's ascendant, is at the 12th degree of Sagittarius, which means that it will be forming a conjunction, and a fairly tight conjunction at that, to this upcoming full moon and eclipse. Now, as I stated earlier in the video, right, the major and more prominent effects do come from this eclipse touching major luminaries, in addition to the ascendant and perhaps even the midheaven as well. So I will say, from our standpoint, right? Internal affairs from the United States of America. This could definitely unlock a lot of those effects and a lot of those I would even say straight up revolutionary after effects, because once again we're talking about like the country's inception, right? So think about what was going on during the time America came to be, as far as establishing independence from what Great Britain. And granted, for all of my black people out there, this actually had very little to do with our people, but nonetheless, right, it is still part of the history that shaped the world and the country and communities that we exist in now, for better or for worse. Mostly for worse, but that's a different video for a different day. Okay, so expect a lot of those once again type of revolutionary kind of vibrations to kind of be sent out there into the air, which is also once again still very fitting given the current circumstances that we're facing as far as fighting for justice. Sagittarius deals with justice, right? A very strong need for everybody to be heard. People feeling very strongly in their beliefs. I mean, this could even deal with the straight up radicalization of one's beliefs. So we're talking about some very like groundbreaking shit to come, right? Major advancements made to our country. And not for nothing, this could even deal with a lot of parallels to certain civil wars, you know what I'm saying? Which is very interesting because that effectively kind of feels like what we're being led up to, energetically speaking. Now, during this eclipse, our transiting ascendant will be at the 7th degree of Libra, opposing Chiron in Aries, which reinforces this theme of justice, right? And social justice at that, with that Libra element, and people fighting for fairness. Okay. Also, the moon in Sagittarius is going to be 1 degree off from the fixed star Sars Outbreak, which does deal with going to war, fighting. So you kind of see these reoccurring themes here, right? Also, you can expect very strong emotional responses. Like I said, people fighting for freedoms and beliefs, fighting for justice, racial and international tensions coming to a boiling point. Okay. Lots of government officials could also be feeling above the law, which is something that, I think we've been feeling as well. Because I forgot to mention, these effects from this particular eclipse can also even be felt before, okay, before the actual occurrence to a certain degree. So hence why people are even protesting and taking to the streets in the first place. Law officials, government officials, which can also be indicated with that Sagittarius element, feeling like they are above the law. And that's reinforced with this moon forming an opposition to our sun and Gemini. And the sun effectively does deal with people in power. In a very traditional sense, you can associate it with dictatorships, but you can also associate it with, even the president, right? Major people in power, because it denotes a certain level of like hierarchy. And you can look at that as a total standoff between the people, like we the people, and then the people in power, right? Expect violence, an uptick in violence. And like I said, this could be just in the following years to come. People turning against and raging against one another, things coming together also for on a more positive standpoint, people gaining a more holistic understanding of the goal here, people feeling a lot more connected with one another spiritually from a holistic standpoint, understanding the bigger picture of it all. However, we should avoid and be mindful of putting all of our eggs in one basket. All right. Being or attaching and devoting ourselves to one particular outcome. During this time, you're going to also see a lot of people be judged. A lot of people, and this can manifest in a lot of motherfuckers going to jail. Which is going to be another video for another day, because we can get into the nuts and bolts of it all. But just know it's going to be a lot of people going to jail, and there's going to be a lot of people, even if you aren't going to jail, it's like this standpoint to where a lot of transgressions are going to be brought to the the forefront. And like I said, this could also apply to just a global scale, not even just okay within America. Be prepared for a lot of truths, once again, definitely on brand, to be revealed, and a lot of people have to face, I mean, you got to face the music, right? Also prepared to hear a lot about asteroids and space advancements, as the Sagittarius element also deals with things that are up high, right? Expansive, things that are way out there. Which is very interesting because I just came across an article saying that there was a asteroid the size of a stadium, like a football stadium, very close, like passing very closely to Earth. And then we just sent some astronauts into outer space, y'all. So there's that. Also, this upcoming full moon will be squaring off with our transiting Mars and Neptune and Pisces, which can absolutely deal and add on to this element of things being, I would even say, out of control, because you got to think about it, that's a lot of mutable energy, and it could create what do you call it, like a trigger, like a hair trigger, to where it's a lot of tension, a lot of mountain energy, but all it takes is just one little thing for shit to go all the way left. And when it goes left, it's gone. There's no putting the cat back in the bag. There's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube. Like it's just gone. But it could also even deal with things escalating out of control due to an extreme and intense sensitivity. Everybody is very sensitive to what's going on around them at the moment. So once again, feelings of anger, and rage. It could be also like a lot of virtue signaling taking place during this time. So be mindful of that, where it's like, because people are so sensitive, we get into the, what do you call it, microaggressions of it all, and people trying to do the oppression Olympics and blah, 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 blah. But which is something that kind of has been going on for a while now. But nonetheless, we could also anticipate a very significant spiritual shift that is going to be marked by a very strong period of restlessness, people not really knowing what's to come, a certain level, even I would even say confusion, you know what I mean? People not really being sure what way to go, and almost like a lack of direction, which is something else that I have personally been feeling, as far as like just picking up from different people. You know, a lot of people can experience some difficulty sleeping during this time, or very vivid dreams. This could also deal with where, as a collective, maybe we'll be disillusioned in a great way. You know, there could be a huge letdown or a disappointment coming. Like I said, but it just takes one thing to kind of trigger that chaotic response, and shit is going to hit the motherfucking fan. Okay? Now, just to give and provide a little bit of context in regards to the last lunar eclipses that we did have in Sagittarius, and how that shaped our world and society at large. Back in December 14th, 2001, we had a lunar eclipse at the 23rd degree of Sagittarius. And obviously that whole like early thousands era is marked by or in the light of the terrorist attacks, the 9/11 terrorist attacks. So feelings of nationalism being on, I mean, at an all-time high, but it really shined a certain light on America and our relationships with other countries and foreign countries, because, you know, we started, quote unquote, fighting the war on terrorism and so on and so forth. I mean, the day before this December 14th eclipse in 2001, George Bush withdrew from the anti-ballistic peace treaty. So you see what I'm saying? Like, relationships being severed, new ties being made, new foundations and structures being laid down. On May 26th in 2002, we had another lunar eclipse in Sagittarius at the 5th degree. And the day before that, a Boeing flight 747, it was a China airline flight, actually crashed. which, I mean, aircraft in and of itself, you can associate that with Aquarius energy, but nonetheless, right, this whole theme of like long distance travel, things up high, falling down. So on a figurative and metaphorical level, you can even look at this as, major letdowns and disappointments. You know what I mean? You also saw a major uptick in suicide bombings. Once again, the radicalization of people and their beliefs, people willing to die over the things that they believe in. Also, I thought it was very interesting that back in 2002, there was a SARS outbreak. Remember, the severe acute respiratory syndrome, and the coronavirus, or COVID-19, is very closely related to this SARS family. It's within the SARS family. And so you could even look at this, because the juxtaposition, or maybe I should say the opposition between Sagittarius and Gemini, or our South Node, right? The Sagittarius South Node and Gemini North Node, in addition to us also having transiting Sun in Gemini and Venus retrograde Gemini. Expect to see another second wave, or a second wave, another wave of this coronavirus stuff, because that Gemini element can absolutely deal with the respiratory system. So viruses that impact your respiratory system. So I do see, whether it be government made or not, an uptick in those issues. So that is wild. That is so wild. Now, on November 23rd in 2003, we had another eclipse, lunar eclipse in Sagittarius at the first degree, and the president of Georgia, not Georgia, not Atlanta, Georgia, but the country, Georgia, resigned after a widespread protest engulfed the country following a dispute in a parliamentary election. So they were having some issues in regards to their, I don't know if they're a democracy, but their election system. And which is so interesting, because we're living in the time of, look at the widespread protests that are taking place now, right? Once again, putting the pressure on the people in power after they overstep their boundaries. So, I could go on, and I guess I can make a second video for this for all of my Patreon members. But yeah, this is just to give you guys a general understanding of what maybe you could expect from this particular lunar eclipse. So that concludes my video. Y'all be sure to drop down in the comment section. Feel free to share your thoughts, opinions. Have you been experiencing anything on an individual level? Or what are your thoughts on this? Okay. And make sure you guys practice unconditional love, self-love, so that you can love others. And until the next video, I holla.